It's the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
When it comes to talking about Robert Williams, I had like a super late epiphany. I got to get Chris Forsberg from NBC Sports Boston, noted Robert Williams aficionado, to come on in and discuss the offseason decisions. Chris Forsberg, how you doing, man?
So, one, I was very appreciative. I will not lie. I was, it's a little late, and I might have started packing up the equipment for the day, thinking, I recorded my pod earlier. And then I said, you know what? I'm going to set it all right back up. Desperate times calls for desperate measures. If there's Rob Williams to be talked about, I have to be available for that. That's like part of being the president of the fan club requires you to be ready at all hours for Robert Williams talk. So here we are.
It was hilarious because I was like, I don't know, I was having a late dinner. I was out watching the Brooklyn Nets game, and I'm thinking like, all right, how am I going to do this podcast? Like trying to outline it in my head as I'm like having my dinner. I'm like, wait a minute, why haven't I reached out to Forsberg yet? Mm-hmm. So like, ultra shot in the dark. This is my ultra shot in the dark moment. And you're like, yeah, sure. Yeah, no problem. So
a couple things. One, I appreciate it. I'm glad you were out to dinner because you allowed us to watch the end of the Bucks game, which was hilariously bad.
Oh and
I was glad I didn't tie you up podcasting while that was going on. Two, do you have to change the intro song now that it says Danny at the deadline?
Yes, that's going to be a thing. So I started in the middle of the season. I started to do a search for a new song. And the season got so crazy that I kind of abandoned it. And so now that the offseason is here, I am going to rekindle this search. We're going to do a search for a new intro song. Basically, I want to do like a local artist and try and, get them some exposure. I'll do a whole contest thing. I'm trying to get Millies, who did this song, to be a judge on it. So we'll do like an American Idol style kind of search for a new song.
We just had a Medford rapper on Celtics Post Up today. Bia?
Okay.
I'm saying that right? I don't know, but I'm just throwing the flag up.
Sure.
If you've got a local band, like if Aerosmith is watching this, if a Wahlberg happens,
Aerosmith.
if that little band that might become something. If Jay Giles or whoever is left of Jay Giles is watching, I'm. That's all I've got.
I would love to relaunch a 70s band's career as a podcast theme and just have them go into the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame and be like, well, if it wasn't for the Locked On Celtics theme song search, we wouldn't be here right now. So, all right, let's get into some of this Robert Williams talk, which I think it's the consensus is pretty clear. Like Robert Williams he should be the starting center. But
why do you got to throw those butts in there?
Because we'll start with the hip issue because that's the overarching that's the elephant in the room. Let's say.
Are we gonna do a segment on every injury that he has, or
no?
Okay,
we'll do the all.
Might be here.
This is gonna be like a 5-part series. No, but the hip injury is the big thing. Actually, let me throw this out there. Since we're talking about all of the injuries, we have left hip injury, we have left ankle injury, we have left turf toe thing. Everything's on his left side. I have this theory that there's some sort of physiological thing with Robert Williams that all of those injuries are on the left side. And I don't know if it's because he can be a 1-foot jumper and he's always pushing off that foot, or if he just has a thing where one leg is a tiny bit shorter than the other, and that's whatever. But everything's happening on his left side, and the hip injury is a recurring thing that, looking back today on some of the Brad Stevens quotes, it felt very Kemba Walker-ish with how they were treating his hip.
Are you trying to hurt me immediately off the top of the show? But
challenging you.
I never really noticed that. I don't know. My first thought was compensation, and maybe he has a right side issue that is causing him to lean too much on that left side. But irregardless, just as you said, that's a concern. In general, his health is a concern in every conversation that you start talking about, whether it's their ability to lean on him as the starting center, whether it's the extension that we'll get into. it all comes back to health, right? Like you need to be able to lean on this guy, especially on a team that has been so ravaged by injuries for the better part of, let's see, what was 2009 in KG, so 12 years now. It feels like it's constantly comes back to injuries with even their most important players. So I can't like sit here and try and sugarcoat it. I will say this. I kind of go back to this. Like the Celtics know more than we do, right? Or we think they know more than we do. So that gives them some at least difference of confidence than we might have trying to make this discussion, because they can say, oh, this hip, it's not a big deal. Like, and I think I've heard Brad Stevens try to explain it away a couple times, saying like, we're not worried long term. These are all like little things that have bubbled up. I don't know if I'm quite as bullish, because when things continue to happen and the guy just can't stay healthy, it's always a concern. But yeah, I guess in my overly optimistic world, I'd sit there and say, yeah, hopefully these are just freak things. Like who gets turf toe, who has a bum hip that keeps you out for 3 months, and so hopefully but it certainly is part of the conversation.
Yeah, look, I'm really not worried about the turf toe. That stuff happens. Sprained ankles happen to everybody. Mm-hmm. Those things they happen. The hip thing, as we're looking at and evaluating Robert Williams, it's the biggest concern that I have, because is he going to come back? Is it going to hinder him in the offseason? Because he has a lot of work to do to shore some things up, and he's made such strides without having much off-season work time, considering how the first 3 years of his career have gone. But he still has a lot of work to do, some strengthening stuff to do, all of that. And if he's at all hindered by this hip in the offseason, that hurts his development for the regular season. And if they have to worry about, we need a third center next year, like let's say they have, okay, we got Tristan Thompson. Let's just pretend Tristan Thompson's going to be there all year. You got Robert Williams. Those are your two centers. Generally, you're pretty good with that. But if there's concern over that, then do you keep Luke Cornett, or you go find somebody else? That's a roster spot. That's salary that we know is a concern for this team. Like, it's not just, is he durable? What's the extension stuff? It's, do you need to use an extra roster spot that could be a flyer on another guy? That could be an open spot that you keep for a 2-for-1 type of trade. Anything like that. And every dollar counts towards the tax, which is an issue. All of that is rolled into how durable Robert Williams is. And that's part of the calculus. If you have to keep Luke Cornett and pay $2 million to Luke Cornett, fine, he's never going to play, or he's going to barely play, but that's $2 million in a guy that's on the roster.
Yeah, but I feel like they're going to have a full roster no matter what. Maybe keep one spot open, or just try to kind of save some money there. But okay, then sign two-way players that you can actually lean on. All right, the taco experiment has been fun, but like, there's not a scenario in which Brad Stevens can consistently lean on Taco Fall without fear that there's either going to be matchups or, the how much you can lean on him. It'd be nice if you had a Moses Brown you could throw in there and feel pretty comfortable getting production out of. So I think that comes back to me to a roster construction thing. I think the other thing I think is, like, I'm not sure Tristan Thompson's back. I feel like, right? Like, I mean, there's a world where it does happen. Like, you're just so constrained that you either can't move that deal or whatever. You have to bring him back. But my assumption that I'm operating with is that the Celtics will have a 1B center who they can consistently lean on, who is probably a floor stretcher and plays somewhere between 24 minutes or 20 to 24 minutes when Rob's healthy, but can also play 30 to 34 minutes when Rob is not healthy, because you just have to plan for that in instances. And that's unfortunate, but that just might be part of the package with Rob, is you just need to have a backup plan until he can show you that full bill of health and maybe make you feel a little bit more confident that he can be upright for longer stretches.
Well, that goes back into the point that I was making. Like, okay, let's say they trade Tristan Thompson, which I'm all for, but they bring in that 1B center. Forget about who it might be. That 1B center, like you said, might have to be a 1A center. And normally, under normal circumstances, Robert Williams is the starter. Like, I feel 1,000,000% sure that under normal circumstances, Robert Williams is your starter next year. You play him 34 minutes a game. That's great. That's going to be part of a really good team. But Brad Stevens, now in charge of the entire team, he knows better than anybody. What's he going to do? Does he trade Tristan Thompson? Does he keep Tristan Thompson? Does he add another center? I think a lot of the decisions that Brad Stevens makes this offseason are going to be so telling about things that we weren't sure about during the season. And this is going to be one of them, where how he structures his center rotation for whomever the new coach is going to be tells us a lot, because if we hear that Tristan Thompson is not really available and trade discussions never materialized, and they bring in a third center that is like, wow, this guy might deserve some minutes, that tells me a lot about what they think about Robert Williams' durability, because we all know that they love him as a player. So that's just one more thing to watch for when it comes to Brad Stevens' decisions.